Hello, and welcome to the Spoonie Authors Podcast, a podcast where we explore a different disabled author's stories each week. I'm your host, Diana Gunn, and joining us today is Laitie Montai. Born and raised in Rochester, New York, Laitie Montai had a pretty average life, but a look inside her imagination would make you think otherwise. She can usually be found daydreaming or writing her daydreams down in a Word document or journal. Today, she still lives in Rochester, New York, with 2 birds, 2 cats, and 14 fish. Hello, Laitie.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. It is wonderful to have you. I have to ask before we start talking about the story, how do you stop your 2 cats from eating your birds and your fish?
So, the birds are in a cage high up off the thing. So the cat can see the birds, might jump at the birds, but luckily in the new house, they haven't jumped at the birds. And the fish, they don't seem to notice, oddly enough.
Really? That's fascinating. I've had a couple friends here and there with both fish and cats, which always seemed like asking for trouble to me. And usually the fish end up being cat TV, right? Because they're closed off. So usually, like most fish, they have to have the top closed anyway, because aquariums are really hard to maintain. But usually the cats at least watch it as TV. Yours don't even notice them?
Yeah, not really. It's weird.
That is crazy. All right, let's move into the story. And your story is also named Birdie. You have a birdie thing happening here. So tell us about Birdie and why this story came into being.
So Birdie, she's just a special character I have. She means a lot to me, and she's like my toe dipping into the water. She has a lot of drama going on in her life, and that's really what the story is about. Birdie's just her nickname. And she has a really high-pitched voice, like a bird, so that's how I got that.
That makes sense. Sounds like Tweety Bird.
Kind of. So, so she's just my attempt at trying to get into publishing and self-publishing and writing and getting myself out there.
That's awesome. So why have you decided to take this path? Is this something you've been thinking about for a long time, or?
The self-publishing path?
Yeah, like, why are you pursuing things in the way that you are pursuing them?
Mostly because I know when you do like traditional publishing, you don't own your own characters. The publisher does. And I'm like, but these are my characters. These are my babies. So that's really the only reason that's pushed me to self-publishing. You know, I don't want the publisher to have power over my career. I want to have power over my own career.
That's completely fair. And so you tend to write short stories, correct? That's sort of where your focus is?
That's actually a really funny part about it, though. I intend to write full-length books, but I am so short and to the point and direct that by the time I'm done with the story, I'm about 10,000 words short of an actual book.
See, I have the opposite problem. Every time I sit down to write a short story, I end up with at least one novel. Maybe if we could meet somewhere halfway, somewhere in the middle between us, that might be good.
That'd work.
So it's sort of an accident that you end up writing short stories? It's not something you're drawn to, or?
Right, it's really a lot of an accident. You know, short stories are not popular. They're not common. I don't even read short stories because they're not popular. So I don't really know where to find them. So yeah, it really is just a happy accident. They're short stories.
Fair enough. There are actually lots of great places to find flash fiction too, but I note that like short stories that are like in the middle range, anywhere between like 2,000 words and actually being a novel are harder to find. Um, but I would really recommend Daily Science Fiction for flash fiction, and they do every once in a while publish a longer short story, and they send one out every day, as one might expect from their name. They're really great. If that is something that you want to look into more, that listeners are interested in, is reading more short stories.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks.
I try to be helpful. For a while, also, like, I thought that I was going to write short stories and sell them because it seemed like a practical way to get into the habit of writing. And then every time I wrote a short story, it ended up being, all of the feedback I got was, this is actually a novel. What are you doing trying to sell me this? This feels like a first chapter. But so I do know of these magazines, and unfortunately a lot of them have closed. It's really hard out there for short story magazines. But there are still some really great ones. So
I know an online one called Books and Quills Magazine. I will
are they
email
still
you the link.
running? I
Huh?
feel like they've been around for a while. I didn't realize they were still running.
Yeah. I live on their Discord. They're my friends.
Discord is phenomenal, especially for us disabled writers, because it can be so hard to actually, get out and have a social life in the world rather than it's so easy when it's all on our computers.
Yeah. Yeah, I have anxiety and depression, and driving in the roads today, I'm super proud of myself that I did it because my anxiety was going wild with all the snow.
Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Rochester, New York.
Right. So how snowy is it there? I mean, it's been going since I woke up here, but I can't. I live in a basement, so it's really hard to tell how much has actually stuck to the ground. I just know that it's been snowing all morning.
It's snowing so fast that the plows can't keep up.
Oh, wow.
And I think there was half an inch or an inch on the road when I was driving.
Wow. And I guess, that's completely not normal stateside. I'm Canadian, so we're like half an inch of snow, whatever, but
Yeah.
it's not normal in most of the US. And so I see a lot of people freaking out right now.
Yeah. It's mostly normal, but the fact that the plows couldn't keep up was what made it really bad.
Yeah, that's always a challenge and makes driving a scary thing. I think snow is much better if you don't have to drive in it. Like, it's gorgeous. Snow makes the world beautiful. But as soon as you have to drive in it or take a bus in it, it's just bad.
Right.
All right. So I was going to ask you if there were any short stories you had that had an impact on you, but I guess since you don't read short stories, I'll just open it up to what are some stories that you have really loved that have made an impact on you as a person and as a writer? Oh, and bonus points for disability representation.
Exactly. Unfortunately, I don't have any disability rep because, of course, growing up, there wasn't much of anything. But a lot of stories, like stories by Tamara Pierce, obviously Harry Potter, too, and a lot of the fantasy have really impacted me. I've always been attracted to people who are different from me. So I grew up in a good house with happiness and whatever I needed. So I was always interested in the poorer class, the people who struggle, thieves, street rats, things like that, those tropes. And those kind of really taught me how to be a writer, how to treat people, even whether they have disabilities or not, how to treat people, how to be a decent person.
Absolutely. I think, ironically enough, with all of the things that have come out over the last couple of years, Harry Potter did teach that to a lot of people. especially like, you know, J.K. Rowling might be whatever J.K. Rowling is, but the
Yeah.
Harry Potter fandom, the community, at least, you know, of the people that were obsessed with Harry Potter as it was coming out that are like, you know, our age, um, they're phenomenal people and they fight for equality and they believe in treating people equally and um they will say, you know, they got it from fantasy. And there have been a lot of actually interesting studies about emotional intelligence and reading. So I think that's a really cool thing to talk about. God, I could do a whole solo podcast just talking about that. It's great.
No, I agree. I think I have Asperger's. So with ADD and Asperger's, I've always struggled with social stuff. And when I don't understand how to be something, how to do something, I turned to books. I read books to kind of learn how to navigate the social world.
Absolutely. Are there any recent books that you've really enjoyed?
Recently, I've actually been into historical fiction.
Nice.
So, yeah, really like medieval times, especially the princesses. Absolutely females. I am Males are great. I live with my beloved boyfriend, but I'm kind of tired of reading about boys saving the world. I want to hear about the girls. So lots of females in my stories and what I'm reading, like Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. I definitely do at this point much prefer reading stories about women with women at the forefront. Um, but I mean, you inevitably will read something with a dude as the main character. Unless you're very, very particular about it, you're gonna end up reading stuff with dudes as the main characters, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just there's a lot of fantasy with women in it now that there didn't used to be, and a lot of historical fiction with women at the forefront is starting to become more of a thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's kind of just acknowledging that women have been the ones reading historical fiction this whole time. So now we're actually becoming the main characters as well.
Mm-hmm. Little sneak peek, my work in progress has, we're tired of reading about guys. I'm tired of writing about guys. So I was writing a girl, and then I was like, but she's not a girl. So I have a transgender character coming up.
Awesome. I love that.
It's not really like a political stance or a political dialogue. It's just like, well, he happens to be this way, and I'm gonna roll with it.
Yeah, and that's honestly how it should be. And I think that that's part of our duty as authors to leave space for that. When I was, you know, first writing, there was always just this assumption that my characters were cis and straight, and it wasn't something I ever analyzed until a couple of years ago. And, you know, even character profiles, so often they'll have, you know, they might have a spot for gender, but they won't have a spot for sexuality because it's just assumed that your characters are straight. And so that's been a really huge thing for me to, you know, actually add that to my character profiles and deliberately think about it when I'm creating the characters. And I don't think that should be a political decision at all. That should just be like leaving room for characters to authentically be themselves and to
Yeah.
be real people. Because that is what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to create people that feel like real people.
Exactly.
Do you have any disability rep in your stories? Do you think that's in the pipeline or?
In the plan, there is some. I have to actively think of it most of the time because I feel like all my characters have a touch of depression, Asperger's, ADD, because that's all I've known my entire life. But definitely, like the transgender character has PTSD. So there's definitely room for me to write more disability characters, but it's definitely in the plan too.
Awesome. And on that note, how would you like to see representation in media as a whole change in the next 5 years?
Just treating disability as like a normal thing, not like, oh my gosh, this disabled person did this thing that's hard for them. No, just more like this person did this, and don't even mention the disability, and then you see a picture of someone in a wheelchair and it's no big deal. Just keeping it not as important as everything else, because it's not, it is, but it isn't, you know.
Yeah, it's, and I mean, I think it really depends on the disability too. Like,
True.
Something I've noticed as I've been stepping more into disabled communities is that there are a lot of people who feel like they are not defined by their disability and like they are defined by everything else. But there are some people, and it's usually the people who have, severe chronic pain that is debilitating on a daily basis, who do feel like they are deeply defined by that disability. And I think that's something to be aware of and to consider if you're going to have a disabled character, is that a lot of disabled people, it's just sort of tangential. Once they figure out how to operate as disabled people, it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, and it probably depends on the person too. I think you're right with that.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, is not treating people like a monolith.
Yeah, exactly. I actually work a lot with people with disabilities nowadays, so I definitely get to see how it affects people's lives besides the mental disabilities that I only know about. So it's really nice to get those other perspectives from the other people all the time.
Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing we can do as writers, really, is to try to understand what life is like for other people.
Right. And that's what I've always loved doing as a writer anyway, so.
So can I ask a bit about this other work that you're doing out there working with disabled people? Because that sounds awesome.
It's not like a lot of work. I work with a gentleman named Alec Frazier, who is a disability rights activist.
Awesome.
Yeah, and he does a lot of reviews of things, and he does a lot of political stuff to get disability rights going and rolling. And I got to go to a seminar for people with disabilities trying to get jobs. So that's where I learned most of what it's like to be hard of seeing or things like that. And then we go to cons. We go to like New York Comic Con. I almost went. I couldn't afford it. I was really sad. And we speak on being writers as with Asperger's, actually, specifically. And that's really fun too, because you get to go to a convention.
That sounds like a really phenomenal experience. How did you luck your way into that?
Yo, that was luck, man. I was dating this guy who definitely was diagnosed with Asperger's, and Alec had a thing at a convention that my boyfriend at the time and I went to had a panel for Asperger's, comic writers with Asperger's or something like that. And we went to it, and Alec just liked me. He really, not like romantically or anything, very platonic. He just like took to me and I took to him, and we became really good friends. And I soon after that discovered I might have Asperger's, and he started inviting me to talk on panels, and it was amazing. It's great. Alec has changed my life and means a lot to me.
That's amazing. What is it like doing panels with your anxiety? How do you keep your anxiety under control while you're doing that in front of all of those people?
That's not really too much of the hard part. I like the spotlight. I like talking. But if anxiety does show up, just breathing, if I need to, uh, I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but I use CBD, Innovate. That helps when like I'm having a full-on attack and I need something quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But most of the time, just breathing, getting excited. It's going to be fun. People are going to be listening to my words and they're interested in what I have to say. And that excites me rather than anxiety. It gives me anxiety.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you are out there doing such great work. That comes to the end of my questions. So I guess we will wrap up. Before you go, how can readers find out more about you and your work?
I have a lot of, 2 or 3 social presences online. Yeah, presences online. I'm on Twitter, Laitie315. I'm on Facebook, Laitie Montai, and brokencrayoncoloring.wordpress.com. I don't have my own domain yet. I have to pay for that. I don't have money. But brokencrayoncoloring.wordpress.com is my blog.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And for anyone who's wondering how that is spelled, it is Laitie. Is how Laitie is spelled, so that will help you find her. Thank you so much for joining us, Laitie. It's been wonderful chatting with you. I know we had some scheduling hiccups, and thank you for accommodating me and my craziness that I call a life. And have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful life.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for putting up with me too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Spoonie Authors Podcast. The Spoonie Authors Podcast is part of the Spoonie Authors Network, a community initiative devoted to sharing the stories of disabled authors and educating abled people about what life is like for disabled creatives. Transcripts of this podcast are also available on the Spoonie Authors Network. To learn more or become a contributor, visit spoonieauthorsnetwork.blog. And of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast streaming platform.